William Shakespeare Lesson 4. William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Learning objectives. In the previous lesson we discussed Shakespeare as a writer of Elizabethan age. The present lesson is intended to familiarize you with the subject of the play, Hamlet. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to know the plot and a detailed analysis of the play. This analysis would enable you to interpret it in different ways in the following lesson. 4.1 Sources of Hamlet. It is interesting to note that the great playwright, Shakespeare, was hardly original with regard to the subject matter of the plays. For almost all of his dramas, Shakespeare relied on different sources. Similarly, Shakespeare's original source of Hamlet was a play called Your Hamlet, having the same subject, written by Thomas Kyd. This play was performed in London before 1590. Shakespeare himself happened to be in the group that acted in Kyd's drama. Shakespeare borrowed the main storyline as well as various other elements from Kyd's drama. These elements include the ghost, the play within the play, and the duel. Thomas Kyd had written the Spanish tragedy, which was popular in the Elizabethan stage. Shakespeare's Hamlet was mainly based on the Spanish tragedy. Similarly, various other minor sources are also attributed to the origin of Shakespeare's Hamlet. In fact, the Elizabethan audience were already familiar with the story of Hamlet. Yet Shakespeare's Hamlet was instantly successful on the same Elizabethan stage. The credit for the success goes to not merely the story, but to the treatment of the subject. Shakespeare's originality lies in applying the Elizabethan conventions to the play. 4.2 Synoptic outline of Hamlet. Shakespeare begins Hamlet with the introduction of a ghost. The ghost resembles the late King of Denmark. The sentries first see the ghost. The sentries immediately bring Horatio, a friend of Hamlet, to observe the ghost. The ghost appears, disappears, reappears, and finally leaves. Later, Claudius, the King of Denmark, brother to the late king, inquires about Hamlet. Hamlet's father had been dead just 2 months ago. His mother married his uncle, Claudius, who has now become the King of Denmark. Horatio informs Hamlet about the ghost. Both of them decide to meet the following night in order to see whether the ghost will appear again. In the meanwhile, Laertes advises his sister, Ophelia, not to trust Hamlet. Polonius, the king's advisor, also warns Ophelia not to believe Hamlet. When Hamlet and Horatio wait for the ghost appears in the night. This time, the ghost wants to have a private talk with Hamlet. The ghost reveals to Hamlet that he is the spirit of Hamlet's father. The ghost also states that Claudius, the present king, had murdered Hamlet's father. Claudius poured poison in the ear of Hamlet's father when he was asleep. The ghost disappears by asking Hamlet to take revenge against Claudius. But the ghost asks Hamlet to leave his mother's punishment to heaven. Hamlet loses his peace of mind. The king shows interest in knowing the reasons for the change in the behavior of Hamlet. The king wants to know about the state of Hamlet from his childhood friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. In the meanwhile, a traveling troupe of actors visits the king for providing entertainment. Hamlet arranges for inserting a small incident into the evening performance. The play is presented. Hamlet asks his friend, Horatio, to observe the reaction of the king to the play within the play. In this play there is an incident of a king being murdered in the same way Hamlet's father was murdered. At this moment, the king rises and rushes away. The king decides to send Hamlet to England. In the meanwhile, the mother of Hamlet talks to Hamlet, and warns him to behave himself. But Hamlet is equally angry with his mother. At one stage, Hamlet is about to murder the king. But he does not do so as the king is in his prayer. When Hamlet is talking to his mother, Polonius hides himself behind a tapestry. Mistaking Polonius for the king, Hamlet kills him with the sword. In the meanwhile, arrangements have been made to send Hamlet to England. The purpose of sending Hamlet to England is to get him killed. Hamlet understands this plot. He takes a firm decision to avenge his father's death. However, Hamlet escapes successfully on his way to England. Therefore, the king arranges for the murder of Hamlet in a duel with Laertes. In this plot, Laertes has previously dipped his sword in poison. The king is to prepare poisoned drink to be offered to Hamlet during the duel. In the meanwhile, the queen reports that Ophelia has committed suicide by drowning herself. Hamlet learns about the king's plot to kill him. The duel begins. The poisoned drink is offered to Hamlet, but refuses to have it. The queen drinks it unwittingly. In the duel, Laertes wounds Hamlet with the poisoned sword. Accidentally, the swords are exchanged in the scuffle. Now, Hamlet wounds Laertes with the exchanged sword. At this stage, the queen dies. Laertes falls down as he was stabbed by Hamlet. By the end of the play, the king, Laertes and Hamlet die. Before his death, Hamlet asks Horatio to tell his story recommending Fortinbras to be the king. The play ends when Fortinbras enters with English ambassadors. Hamlet is carried off the stage in a noble way. The audience is informed towards the end that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are also dead. 4.3 Dramatis Personae. Before familiarizing ourselves with the incidents of Hamlet in detail, let us take a look at the characters, Dramatis Personae, of the play. The play has the following characters. 4.3.1 Dramatis Personae. Claudius, King of Denmark. Hamlet, son to the late and nephew to the present king. Fortinbras, Prince of Norway. Polonius, Lord Chamberlain. Horatio, friend to Hamlet. Laertes, son of Polonius. Cornelius. Rosencrantz. Voltimand. Guildenstern, courtiers, and childhood friends of Hamlet. Osric, a gentleman. A priest. Marcellus. Bernardo, officers. Francisco, a soldier. Reynaldo, servant to Polonius. Players. A Norwegian captain. English ambassadors. 2 clowns, gravediggers. Gertrude, Queen of Denmark, and mother to Hamlet. Ophelia, daughter to Polonius. Ghost of Hamlet's father. Lords, ladies, officers, soldiers, sailors, messengers and attendants. 4.3.2 A detailed analysis of Hamlet. ACT 1. The play is divided into 5 acts. The first act has 5 scenes. The first scene of Act 1 begins the action of the main plot. It begins with the appearance of a ghost to Bernardo. He describes the ghost by saying that it resembles the late King of Denmark. Horatio also tells others that the armor worn by the ghost is the same as that of King Hamlet. He also tells that the military preparations are on at Elsinore to face Fortinbras of Norway. The ghost appears again and disappears. In the second scene, King Claudius thanks the court for the cooperation extended to his election as the king. He also informs about the ensuing war by Fortinbras. Claudius asks Hamlet why he looks so dull. Gertrude asks Hamlet to stop mourning. But Hamlet replies by saying that this type of consolation is not going to satisfy him. Claudius asks Hamlet to treat him as his own father. He also asks him to stay at Denmark instead of returning to his studies in Wittenberg. Hamlet consents, but he reveals his inner feelings in a soliloquy. He suggests that he feels like dying. We understand that he is not able to digest his mother's marriage to Claudius. He accuses his mother to be unfaithful to his father. The scene ends when Horatio informs Hamlet about the appearance of the ghost. Hamlet shows interest in meeting the ghost. In the second soliloquy, Hamlet suspects a foul play in the death of his father. The third scene introduces romance between Hamlet and Ophelia. Polonius is the father and Laertes is the brother of Ophelia. Both of them caution Ophelia not to pay any attention to Hamlet in order to protect her virtues. Polonius gives a lecture to Laertes about gentle behavior. He gives several codes of conduct with regard to friendship. Polonius understands that Ophelia is entertaining the idea of love for Hamlet. Therefore, he reprimands her, and asks her to forget Hamlet. The fourth scene is about Hamlet's meeting of the ghost. Hamlet, while waiting for the ghost, accuses the king to be a drunkard. The ghost appears suddenly. Hamlet queries whether it is the real ghost, if so why it has come. In response, the ghost beckons Hamlet to a lonely place for a private talk. The same incident of Hamlet's encounter with the ghost continues in the fifth scene too. In this scene, the ghost identifies itself to the spirit of Hamlet's father. The ghost asks Hamlet to take revenge against his father's murder. The ghost also reveals that Claudius murdered his father by pouring poison into the ear. The ghost also tells Hamlet that his father did not die of a sting as said by Claudius. However, the ghost asks Hamlet to spare his mother. The act ends with the third soliloquy of Hamlet. In this soliloquy, Hamlet is emotional. He takes the ghost's call for the revenge very seriously. Hamlet asks his friends to keep what they have seen a secret. They oblige him. Hamlet takes a decision to feign madness. Act 2. Act 2 has only 2 scenes. In the first scene the action takes place in the house of Polonius, who instructs his messengers, Reynaldo, on how to make inquiries about Laertes, who is in parts. When Reynaldo leaves, Ophelia enters in a frustrated mood. She tells her father about the typical behavior of Hamlet. Polonius understands that Hamlet is suffering from love sickness. He decides to inform the same to the king. In scene 2, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are summoned to the king's court. King Claudius shows his concern for the strange behavior of Hamlet. Both the king and the queen plan to make use of their services in changing the mind of Hamlet. Polonius enters and informs the king about Hamlet's strange behavior. In the meanwhile, the ambassadors enter the court suggesting that Fortinbras has stopped plan of invading Denmark. King Claudius expresses his pleasure at this news. Polonius states that Hamlet has gone mad. As evidence to this, Polonius reads out a letter written by Hamlet to Ophelia. Polonius requests the king and the queen to believe him. Polonius prepares to arrange an encounter between Hamlet and Ophelia. At the same moment Rosencrantz and Guildenstern also arrive. Hamlet rightly suspects the purpose of the visit of his friends. Therefore, he asks them to inform the king that Hamlet has lost interest in life in the world and also in women. At this juncture, Polonius enters announcing the arrival of the actors. Immediately, Hamlet resumes his mad behavior. The players start reciting dialogues and acting. Hamlet arranges with the actors to perform the play, The Murder of Gonzago. He adds 16 lines to the original script. During the play, Hamlet decides to observe the behavior of his uncle. He wants to see the presence of guilt in his uncle. Because Hamlet is interested in finding substantial evidence to the effect that his uncle had murdered his father. Thus, the second act concludes with Hamlet's arrangement for the play within the play. Act 3. Act 3 has 4 scenes in it. In the first scene Rosencrantz and Guildenstern inform the king about the reason for Hamlet's lunacy. They report to the king and the queen that Hamlet showed interest in the proposed play. The king is delighted to learn that he has been asked by Hamlet to watch the play. He consents. In the meanwhile, the proposed encounter between Hamlet and Ophelia has been arranged. Claudius and Polonius hide themselves behind a curtain to listen to their conversation. Hamlet now enters with his soliloquy, which is the third one in the play. In this important soliloquy, Hamlet speaks that suicide is a means of escape from his problems. At this moment, Hamlet notices Ophelia, who says that she wants to return the gifts that she received from Hamlet. But Hamlet says that he has never given anything. Subsequently, Hamlet tells that he was in love with her once, but he loves her no more now. Hamlet asks her to go to a nunnery, as men are not trustworthy. He continues to abuse marriage and womanhood. Claudius and Polonius joined Ophelia. Claudius now strongly feels that Hamlet has to be sent to England. But Polonius suggests that the queen should be asked to find out the reason for Hamlet's strangeness in behavior. The second scene is crucial in the play. Everything is set for the enactment of the murder of Gonzago. Hamlet asks Horatio to observe his uncle's reaction. Hamlet resumes his lunatic behavior. The play begins with the affectionate scene between the king and the queen. When the king sleeps, the queen leaves. Then, a man enters, takes off the crown of the king, and kisses it. He pours poison in the ears of the king, and leaves. Then, the queen returns only to find her husband dead. She expresses her grief. The murderer enters, and gets the dead body removed. Then he asks the queen to marry him. The queen resists in the beginning, but accepts the offer at last. Hamlet asks his mother how she enjoyed the play. In reply, Gertrude answers that the queen resisted too much. King Claudius suddenly calls for an end to the play. Now, Hamlet firmly believes that it was Claudius who killed his father. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern inform Hamlet that the king is sick. They also inform him that the queen wants to talk to her son. This act ends with another soliloquy, in which Hamlet entertains murderous thoughts. But he decides not to harm his mother. In the third scene, the king asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to help him in sending Hamlet to England. Polonius reports to the king that Hamlet is going to his mother's room for a talk. Claudius regrets to himself the murder he committed against his own brother. He regrets, and hopes that the prayer will rescue him. Hamlet comes with a drawn sword. But he does not kill Claudius as he is at prayer. Hamlet declares that Claudius should die in a state of sin. The fourth scene is about the talk between Hamlet and his mother. Gertrude admonishes him, but she is frightened by his harsh replies. Polonius listens to the conversation from behind the curtain. When Gertrude cries for help, Polonius enters. Hamlet kills Polonius, mistaking him for King Claudius. Hamlet tells his mother that her marriage to Claudius has disturbed him. He accuses her of having lust for Claudius. At this moment, the ghost enters. It reminds him of his promises of revenge. His mother, however, cannot see the ghost. She thinks that it is not a ghost at all but merely a hallucination. Hamlet asks his mother not share her bed with Claudius. Hamlet regrets the death of Polonius. He tells her that he is being sent to England only to be killed. However, he announces that he will protect himself. Act 4. The fourth act has 7 scenes in it. In the first scene, Gertrude tells Claudius that Hamlet has killed Polonius. But he is worried about how to justify the murder of Polonius. Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to bring the body of Polonius. But in the second scene, Hamlet refuses to tell them where the dead body is. Instead, he agrees to accompany them to the king. In the third scene, Rosencrantz enters, and says that the dead body could not be traced out. Hamlet, who enters along with them, gives irresponsible replies. Claudius asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to send Hamlet to England for immediate murder. In the fourth scene, Hamlet regrets his delay and indecision. He promises to himself not to waste his time anymore, and avenge his father's death. In the fifth scene, Ophelia desires to speak to the queen. Ophelia enters and sings songs about love, seduction and death. Claudius is greatly disturbed by the mad behavior of Ophelia. Laertes, the son of late Polonius, suspects Claudius for the death of his father. In the sixth scene, Horatio receives a letter. The letter tells that pirates attacked the ship that Hamlet was sailing in. Subsequently, Hamlet was taken a prisoner. However, he was returned to Denmark on a condition that Hamlet has to help the pirates. Horatio decides to meet Hamlet immediately. In the last scene of this act, Claudius tells Laertes that it was Hamlet who killed his father. Claudius defends himself by saying that he could not punish Hamlet for the murder, because the queen is devoted to her son, and he himself is devoted to the queen. Another reason is that the Danish people are fond of Hamlet. At this moment, a messenger enters with letters from Hamlet. The letters are meant for both the queen and the king. Claudius learns through the letters that Hamlet is back in Denmark. Claudius prepares a plot in which Laertes is to murder Hamlet. The plot is that Laertes has to participate in a sword fight with Hamlet. On the suggestion of the king, Laertes agrees to dip the point of his sword in poison. To doubly ensure Hamlet's murder, Claudius is to provide a cup of poisoned wine to Hamlet. At this point, Gertrude informs Laertes that Ophelia has committed suicide by drowning herself. Act 5. This act has two scenes in it. The first scene is about the gravediggers. They want to find out whether the death of Ophelia is accidental or suicide. Hamlet also enters the grave-digging scene. The gravediggers dig out different skulls, providing humor. Hamlet reflects that the death brings the great to the small to this final state of grinning skulls. At this moment, the funeral procession of Ophelia enters. Hamlet and Horatio hide themselves. Ophelia is buried. Laertes also wants to be buried along with his sister. Then Hamlet jumps into the grave along with Laertes. Both Hamlet and Laertes enter into a scuffle until they are parted. Hamlet emotionally expresses that he had loved Ophelia more than Laertes did. The queen declares that Hamlet is totally mad. The scene ends when Claudius reminds Laertes about their proposed plan of revenge. The last scene of the play begins with the contemplations of Hamlet. Horatio wants Hamlet that he may lose in the proposed sword fight. Hence he asks Hamlet to postpone the match. But Hamlet is prepared to face it. The stage is set for the sword fight. The king, the queen, Laertes and others enter the room. A glass of wine is placed at the table. Hamlet regrets his earlier behavior with Laertes. They choose their foils. The contest begins. In the beginning, Hamlet scores the first two hits. The king tells Gertrude that Hamlet will win. But Gertrude replies that Hamlet may not win as he is in a poor condition. To the king's horror, Gertrude drinks the poisoned cup of wine, and offers the same to Hamlet. But he refuses to drink it. At this moment, Laertes wounds Hamlet with his poisoned sword. Then the swords get exchanged out of confusion. The poisoned sword is now in the hands of Hamlet, who wounded Laertes. The queen falls. Hamlet starts bleeding. Laertes too starts bleeding. When Hamlet inquires about the queen, the king replies that she has only fainted at the sight of blood. But the queen cries out that what she drank was the poisoned wine. Hamlet orders to lock the doors for detecting the treachery. In the meanwhile, Laertes informs Hamlet that both of them are nearing the death. He also adds that the king has to be blamed for the death of Gertrude. In a fit of rage, Hamlet strikes the king, and the king dies. Laertes asks Hamlet to pardon him. Hamlet bids farewell to his mother. Horatio also wants to die by drinking poison. But Hamlet stops him. Hamlet dies by approving the election of Fortinbras as the King of Denmark. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have been executed. Thus the final scene ends when the stage is littered with dead bodies full of bloodshed. Fortinbras prepares for the military burial of Hamlet with full state honor. 4.4 Conclusion. No amount of summarizing would give you the original feel of the play. Therefore, you are advised to read the original play so as to enjoy and understand it comprehensively. In the following lessons, we will go ahead with interpreting Hamlet in different ways. 4.5 Self-check questions. 1. Give a brief outline of the plot construction of Hamlet. 2. Enumerate the incidents that take place in Hamlet in a chronological order.